Hello, it's Mr. Ferreira here, and I'm going to be talking you through the final factor that affects attraction, filter theory. Before this, we were able to look at self-disclosure, and we also looked at physical attractiveness. And this is the final section that kind of completes what it is that we're looking at. So the theory itself comes from Kirchhoff and Davis. I don't think this particular name or these names are important. It's obviously really good for you to be able to know who they are, and that's it. So you're not going to get any credit in the knowledge section for referring to their names. So they said here that when selecting partners from a range of those, we suggest that we select partners from a range of those who are potentially available to them. So it's the selection is kind of where the filter comes in. So how do we select partners? It says here we choose 3 filters. These filters narrow down the choice. These filters being social demography, I'll come back to this, similarity of attitudes, and then the last one is going to be complementary of needs. Okay, so these are 3 ideas that they are saying are what we use to filter people down. Okay, so their understanding of kind of factors affecting attraction is this idea that it gives us the best chance to have a relationship with them. Okay, and I suppose this kind of makes perfect sense to us, that potentially when we are seeking a partner, we might then decide that one aspect is more important than another. So we kind of select or kind of filter people out dependent on that. So the 3 filters that they have, people obviously can be critical and say, well, why are there not more filters? But of course, this is them trying to kind of tell us kind of their understanding of filter theory. So let's look at those filters. Social demography. Okay. So obviously just fancy word there to explain kind of our social context, kind of who we are, kind of what makes us in terms of that. And it says the first filter is this. It says people are far more likely to have access to people who come from a similar background to them. Okay, so it is about access and a similar background. Okay, and so think about kind of that particular context. If you are from a particular ethnic group, you might you might meet people through the interactions you have potentially in terms of what parties you go to, or who your parents either approve you of kind of spending time with, and maybe there might be a religious aspect to it that you potentially spend time with certain things. Certainly growing up in South Africa during apartheid, you could argue that there was this clear divide, that in terms of kind of white people kind of socialized with white people and only had positive kind of attitudes towards kind of hanging out with white people in that particular way. And so therefore that would make the most sense that they will end up finding a partner from that similar background. And it's only once the country kind of broke down those barriers and we were able to have a kind of a free and democratic election that those barriers were able to kind of be taken away in terms of people potentially looking for partners kind of from different backgrounds, because it kind of was people were open to that idea because the government wasn't kind of forcing us to do something different. And so I think this is the one that's going to make the most sense to you, that potentially you will find partners that kind of work either in similar fields to you, who go to university, who perhaps kind of understand certain things, maybe even kind of the school background, family background, all of those types of things. That's what social demography is all about. Now, what they are also kind of saying is that it's potentially about proximity as well. So they say geographical proximity. Think about this maybe in a different context. So maybe if you were growing up in a rural village, and there may well actually be very few other people available to you. So proximity, geographical proximity may be an issue. Social class. I know a lot of countries do have kind of a class system that potentially can be barriers for progress. And of course, that's why you might find that, people who have a particular class status might be quite selective about who they kind of go out with and who they don't. We also have ethnic groups. Level of education is sometimes a big kind of way in which we kind of filter through kind of the social context that we are. The next filter that they say that we use is this idea of similarity of attitudes. Okay, so it's not to say that the social demography is all negative. Okay, so obviously you can see it as potentially being selective, but of course it's this idea, as I said, like if I'm socializing within the context of who I am. So, I mean, university is a great example of this. Those are the people that you have also kind of selected a course that's either similar to you or chosen a university at a similar level as you. And so, of course, you might find yourself entering relationships with other people who are studying and have degrees. Or when you go and work, it could be the context of kind of your situation at work, the level of kind of education you have might determine the role you have at work, and this could determine who you kind of associate with or not. It's not a hard and fast rule, so it's not saying that we will exclude people, but it's often kind of context. As I said, if I have a religious background that says I need to be with a type of person who has the same religion as me, then of course I'm going to look for somebody who goes to maybe the same church as me, or goes to church, or goes to the same kind of religious organization as me. So that's where it goes. However, similarity of attitudes is this kind of idea of kind of this validation, this idea that, okay, certain things are potentially kind of approved of. And so what they say here is that they looked at a longitudinal study of two groups of student couples. Okay, and the first group had dated for less than 18 months, and the second group had dated for more than 18 months. So kind of assuming that if you're dated for less than 18 months, that's a relatively short-term relationship, and more than 18 months is a long-term relationship. And of course, what they did was they completed questionnaires and answered questions and stuff like that based on their views and attitudes. Okay, and of course, what we find here is that the similarity of attitudes was the most important factor for the group who had been together for less than 18 months. Similarity of attitudes. Now, of course, this kind of makes perfect sense. So, I don't know, I'm not going to go into anything deep here in terms of an attitude, but if I particularly like a particular political kind of group, and the person I'm with completely doesn't, that could cause conflict. And of course, if I haven't been with that person for a long time, it might cause enough conflict for me to decide that relationship should come to an end. Okay, certainly think about kind of other factors in terms of self-disclosure. You can see that as people were disclosing, they might disclose things that people can't or don't want to kind of deal with and might not be happy with, so it could be that if you like a particular if you like kind of exercising and getting out into the open and doing active things, you might well actually find a partner that does something similar in terms of, so your attitude towards kind of maybe lazing about and doing kind of nothing, you might want to find somebody who's similar to that. Certainly it says here for less than 18 months. And as I said, this is supported by self-disclosure research. Okay, so think about that idea that if I'm sharing things with people, I'm likely to want them to have very similar kind of ideas and attitudes to me. So What I want you to potentially do at this stage, I'll put the link in with the video. I'm not going to show it now because of kind of the restrictions on YouTube, but you can have a look at this video of Seinfeld where he pretty much meets somebody and says they're falling in love with somebody who's just like you. Okay, and of course there's two parts to this. The first part, obviously, consider kind of the pleasure that he has in this particular experience, and then consider the pain. Okay, because we've had similarity of kind of our social context, our social situation. We've had similarity of our attitudes, kind of saying we're looking for somebody who has similar attitudes and ideas as me. But of course, what we might find is that sometimes those similarities could become a problem. So they do say that the third filter is complementary of needs. So something that is complement to something is something that kind of works with it. Obviously, some of the symbols, I know nothing about Chinese symbols, but the yin and the yang, kind of two things fitting into each other. And certainly if you watch the previous video, the Seinfeld video, you will see that potentially some of the things that kind of draw you together in terms of your similarity might ultimately become a problem in the long run. And so what he said that rather than having the same traits, attitudes, and things like that, what we might find is find a partner who complements their spouse. So I'm not going to necessarily deny that obviously having similar type of attitudes is not going to become important. So go to this kind of outdoorsy kind of lifestyle that you may or may not enjoy. Okay, so if you enjoy it, you might kind of seek somebody who kind of has similar ideas or attitudes towards kind of what constitutes a good day or not. Think back to that Aaron video where we looked at how people fell in love. They kind of said similar type of ideas. But the complementary needs, well, what I'm talking about here, so for example, if I'm incredibly stressy, if I'm always kind of obsessed and anxious about something, I might not need to be with somebody who has the same stressy, anxious attitudes as me, because we might actually clash because of having kind of two things that kind of don't kind of work. What I might want is the complement of that. So if I'm stressy, I might want somebody who's perhaps calm and collected, somebody who can potentially kind of see a different perspective. So if I'm the socialite, I might need the organizer. So that's what complements are. Kind of one thing kind of works if we have. It's kind of like if I'm slightly disorganized in what I do, I need somebody who can help me organize. That type of idea. That's what I'm talking about, complementary needs. Okay? So it says if one partner may be good at organization, while the other partner is poor at it, but good at entertaining guests. So, of course, that would be complementary because one person perhaps organizes the dinner party, the other one entertains at the dinner party, kind of both kind of working together, complementing each other. And Kirchhoff and Davis basically said that couples who had been together for more than 18 months tended to have this understanding of complementary needs, that maybe after time they did actually need to find ways in which they complemented each other rather than kind of were too similar. And it could also be, it says here, the origins of the phrase opposites attract. Okay, but only once you've been together for a long enough time, you could argue, in terms of this particular study. Okay. So what you potentially need to do at this particular stage is to be able to obviously explain the filter theory, the three different filters, and kind of how it leads to partner attraction, and kind of explain that within your knowledge part of your essay. However, of course, there are going to be some things that we can use in terms of trying to evaluate this. We can perhaps use the Kirchhoff kind of long-term study and kind of use it as kind of backup research support for this. And And so I'm trying to add to these particular things. It says this theory may be interpreted as similar to the matching hypothesis, but for personality rather than physical traits. Okay, so that is kind of drawing into kind of similar research into the matching hypothesis, saying, well, actually, it's personality that needs to kind of match in the same way. And so the criticism we had for the matching hypothesis is now coming into here, saying the first stage of this model may be less relevant. Okay, so it's a criticism that I've used in the matching hypothesis to say, well, actually, maybe society has moved on. It says modern society is much more multicultural and interconnected. Okay, so so in 1980, living in one particular country without much access to travelling to another country or between kind of cities and towns and stuff like that, that may well be very relevant to me. But of course, years later, with being able to travel countries, certainly I've moved countries and married somebody who kind of is from here. The chances are that maybe this is actually quite a good criticism to say that actually, that the internet, long-term relationships are possible now because people can still see each other virtually. Perhaps consider what you've done during lockdown if you've kind of missing your significant other. So we could say the theory lacks temporal validity. It may be something that may well have been relevant, but is no longer relevant these days. Consider maybe looking back at past. Kind of certainly, I would argue in South Africa, having a multicultural relationship was first of all illegal. So it was very uncommon, but now it's more common. Certainly, if you consider perhaps the people in terms of kind of the choice of partners, there's become an openness of kind of difference to what there was potentially during your grandparents or your parents' kind of time frame. So I do think that this is a relevant criticism. Levenger would also say that it's very difficult to replicate the original findings. To say maybe, well, actually, as we look in a different context, we perhaps do have different answers. We also have a further concern. I say that that when we look at complementary needs and we look at kind of similar attitudes, it says that the work is actually quite correlational, and that's obviously therefore difficult to prove cause and effect. So in other words, having a similar attitude has led me to attraction, and therefore kind of caused the relationship, is something which we need to kind of be concerned. There may well be other aspects of it, and it could well be the physical attractiveness, or could be the disclosure or something like that has led to the relationship and not the similarity of attitudes or complementary attitudes. And to further kind of criticize this idea, it then does look at, okay, so what happens in a relationship as it progresses? And it says there's research that suggests that people become more similar with the time that they spend in the relationship. Now, of course, there could be a concern here to say, well, actually, if I'm prepared to stay with, my partner for 15 years, it's during those 15 years that we've figured out all the kind of difficulties and the things that might be problematic or not problematic, so there's other reasons for this. But the research is basically saying that actually, as time progresses, in order to kind of make your relationship kind of work, those similarities may actually be something that changes. So for example, if I do express particular political views or express ideas over time, it may actually be easier for both of us to have similar ideas and in terms of long-term relationships. So it's a limitation filter theory, is this direct causation may be wrong. So what filter theory is saying is that because we're similar, we become attracted to each other. Okay, and And this is saying no, it's actually could be the other way around, is because we are in a relationship, we ultimately become similar to each other. Okay, so think about kind of what this is saying and the criticism that it has. So it's ultimately then saying there's evidence that similarity may not cause attraction, okay, but the attraction may make us more similar over time. Okay, so think about that. Hopefully it's kind of made sense to you. You might want to go through it. To support this idea that there is a problem with kind of that causal link, this Anderson study is quite interesting. It says here, in a longitudinal study, said the couples who live together become more similar in their emotional responses over time, and he calls this emotional convergence. Okay, so, you know, if actually ultimately I kind of want to continue to be in the relationship I'm in, I need to perhaps kind of know how to respond to my partner's needs. And that emotional convergence is exactly what it is. So over time, kind of this understanding of what is appropriate, what is inappropriate might actually be the case. Davis and Rustberg also says that it says that in romantic relationships over time bring their attitudes into line with each other. So it's kind of actually kind of quite interesting, because the filter theory is kind of saying that these similarities, these ideas kind of bring us together. But actually what these other people are saying is that actually over time, that's kind of when these things kind of start merging together, that it's easier to kind of work on this concept that actually in order for the romantic relationship to last, we need to have these similarities. So it's rather for it to start, it's to last. Okay. Now, I do feel you need to kind of consider what this means in kind of the long term. So these studies suggest that similarity is an effect of initial attraction and not the cause. Okay, the effect of initial attraction and not the cause. And so ultimately what we're saying is that maybe they got it wrong. Maybe you know, your similarity of attitude or complementary needs kind of ideas kind of happen over time and not cause the attraction. So it's quite a kind of detailed kind of back and forth type of idea. Certainly would help you in a discussion type essay to consider all the different things that I've kind of said there. So I kind of then end with this idea. It says here, it may be that in a relationship that it leads to alignment of attitudes, but also greater complementarity as couples assign each other their roles. Okay, so it could be that those couples that work, that are still together over time, that still care for each other over time, that ultimately they do align their attitudes and do then have this complementary. So you do this, I do that. Okay, so who's the person that's going to fix the internet? Okay, this is the person that's going to fix the internet. But who's the person who's going to fix the homework? Oh, it's going to be that person. Or, you know, things like that. So there could just be kind of, you have your different roles and you do your different things. And that's where couples become complementary in terms of their role assignment. So it's quite a detailed point. Hopefully, if you read through it again, you'll be able to kind of see exactly what I mean. So then I go on to another point that says there's evidence that similarity is important. Okay, so even though I've kind of gone back and forth between kind of saying, well, actually, maybe it may not cause attraction, we can't deny that there is something to this. And Condon and Crano, love that type of name, says that actually the similarity may lessen our chance of being rejected as a partner. I kind of think about the disclosure aspect of things. If I go, oh, I love Harry Potter, and the person that I'm in a kind of a date on goes, oh, Harry Potter's stupid, then I might go, yeah, maybe that person might not be best suited for me. And so I might then look for somebody who has the same religious background as me, look at somebody who has the same education background as me, look at somebody who has the same job as me, because that might lessen my chance of being rejected. It's not coincidence that actually there are a number of teachers who do marry other teachers because of the similarity in terms of kind of the time they go on holiday, July, August, you know, their kind of release after the long school year. They kind of go to the same places, do similar things. And of course, that means it lessens our chance of rejection. Byrne and Claw does quite a lot of research on this as well. It says that it finds it rewarding. So in other words, when somebody does say, oh man, I enjoy that too, that becomes important. So sharing of attitudes and beliefs tend to validate them. So kind of obviously go back to that self-disclosure type of idea and kind of go, you know what, actually there could be something to this, that actually finding somebody has similar attitudes towards us. And then kind of, you don't need all of these names to kind of make this point, but certainly choose the correct ones. And says that found that married couples with similar personalities tend to be happier. Okay, so it's not prescriptive. Obviously, it's not saying that you have to be the same in order to be happy. It's kind of saying, well, actually, if you are similar, you tend to be happier. And that potentially then highlights kind of maybe whether we could add to this in terms of determinism as a point. I'll get to it in just a moment. For us to kind of discuss. It says, these studies show that filtering of potential partners may be a good process. Okay, so I don't want you to get the wrong impression to say that actually it's all negative, this filter process, but there could well be something to it. There could be a reason why potentially looking for partners with particular similar interests to us or ideas to us may actually be quite important to us. So then, kind of to end with, we have filter theory may be limited because using a narrow scope of factors to filter, such as attitudes or personality, may not reflect what is best in a relationship. So you can do with this as you please, but I just kind of want you to consider that actually just having 3 filters is quite narrow, and there could be other aspects that we may look into. And there's so many different things. And I just remember from the old course, I found this particular study that I thought was quite interesting. It says, Yoshida says that considering similarity of attitudes and personality, only a very narrow view of the relationship. So there are other factors that could be important, things like self-concept, economic level, physical conditions. So it maybe that's kind of why you find that celebrities go out with celebrities. If you look at, Made in Chelsea, kind of like the rich date the rich and things like that. So there could be kind of other aspects of that. Models go out with footballers. The self-concept, economic level, all these types of things may be important. And this physical condition may well actually be a lot more important than you think. And so there's some research by Speakman that actually says that we choose partners with similar levels of body fat. Okay. Could be part of the matching hypothesis, but certainly does seem to say that these similarity of attitudes is a limited view. Okay. That we need to consider more than this. And so that links with this idea of being deterministic, that maybe the theory is kind of, it doesn't allow us for choice. It kind of says, okay, so I know we're choosing people through the filters, but it's kind of saying that I won't be able to choose beyond those filters, that if I meet somebody who perhaps kind of clashes, that I'm not going to be able to kind of have a sustained and fulfilling kind of relationship. So kind of look at how you can write a determinism argument into this. Remember, it's about choice versus free will. Okay, so free will would allow me to find somebody who kind of maybe clashes against those filters, that does something completely different to the expectation. But of course, determinists will say, well, no, I don't have a choice. Of course, I'm going to be with somebody with similar education level as me, similar socioeconomic level as me, and things like that. Okay, so there we have it. I know it's a longer video. Please, I hope you enjoyed it. Email me if you have any concerns about the content. We see here, discuss the theories affecting attraction is a very stereotypical question you could ask. It does say theories affecting attraction, so therefore you could use filter theory. You could obviously go back to self-disclosure and physical attractiveness and kind of have a look at that in terms of it. It does say theories, so perhaps need to go to more than one. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will kind of speak to you soon. I hope you're looking after yourself. Take care and bye-bye.